reparations, you might say, or they asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed, many thousands of people, and maybe damages for the 52,000 protesters over the last 4 months that were killed in Iran. We think their family should get damages for killing their person or their child or mother, father that were protesting. It's at least, it was 52,000 a month and a half ago. So now what is it? So if there's damages to be paid, I think Iran should pay those damages.
So this part was resolved.
I mean, he's living in a fantasy world, completely divorced from reality. It is shocking, absolutely shocking that he could just say such stupid things, stupid, incorrect things. And the number initially, oh, they killed 5,000. No, they killed 10,000. No, they killed 20. No, 30, 40, no, 52. I heard another Zionist yesterday claim it was 60. Oh, my God. I mean, it's just, it is completely without evidence, but they keep repeating it over and over and over, feeling that if we repeat it enough, it becomes true.
Trump is presenting the Iran situation as if major problems are already being resolved. But Larry Johnson immediately challenges that narrative. His argument is that Washington may be describing a situation that looks very different from what is actually happening on the ground. And that creates the central question of this entire interview. Is the Iran crisis really being brought under control? Or is the political narrative getting ahead of reality? Because what comes next goes directly to the most important pressure point in the region.
Is oil the only thing that's brought out of the Persian Gulf? No. There was liquid natural gas. There was helium. In fact, the LNG brought out was 25% of the global supply. The helium, 40 to 44% of the global supply. I've seen different numbers for it. Sulfur, 30 to 35% of the global supply. Urea, ditto, 30 to 35% of the global supply. That stuff's not coming out via pipeline. That's got to come out through the Gulf. And those are critical commodities, I guess is the right way to, or chemicals that are essential for the global economy. I mean, these people say that, Besant and Netanyahu, oh yeah, all we got to do is build a pipeline and that'll solve the problem. God, I hate stupid people. I really do, particularly when they're supposed to be smart.
Yeah. The other problem is the mines, and here is Donald Trump resolving that as well.
Because they will, on occasion, drop a mine, and we find the mines. We've mine swept the entire strait, as you probably maybe heard, maybe you didn't hear, but we control the strait 100%.
So
yeah, and monkeys fly out of his ass. Okay, yeah, he said so. He just had this big monkey fly out of his ass. It must be true because he said it. I mean, this is patently absurd. All you got to do, and anybody listening or reading or watching, go to vesselfinder.com or marinetraffic.com. Pick your one. It shows the current location, shows what's going in and out of the strait. There's nothing going out on the Omani side that's showing up with radar or allowing itself to be geolocated. And the ones that turn off their AIS system, they get targeted by Iran, and Iran lights them up with a missile.
This is where the crisis becomes much bigger than a dispute over oil. Johnson argues that the Persian Gulf carries other critical commodities and that maritime disruption could have consequences far beyond the energy market. Then comes the bigger challenge. Trump is described as saying the strait is completely under control. Johnson argues that the reality of shipping activity tells a different story. And that's the key distinction. Having military forces in the region is not necessarily the same as guaranteeing safe commercial passage. If vessels remain vulnerable, then declaring the strait open doesn't automatically mean the underlying crisis has been solved. And now the question becomes even more serious. What happens if diplomacy fails completely?
Larry, do you see the attack happening? Donald Trump, he was asked today if the United States would attack Iran. He said that that option is on the table and we are prepared for that. And the perception on the part of Iranian is that, that could happen because they're prepared for that. I
Well,
don't
in
know.
fact, I thought I just saw I was on another show before coming on this one, and they showed me the quote that was issued by I forget who in Iran issued it, but basically said, "We're done negotiating with the United States. We're just going to wait till Trump leaves office, and we're going to continue to do our thing."
They said
That
that.
was
Yeah.
yeah. So you saw that as well?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
Now the stakes move from economic pressure to military escalation. Trump is described as keeping an attack on Iran on the table. At the same time, the Iranian position discussed here suggests Tehran may be prepared to stop negotiating and simply wait out the current American administration. That's the dangerous possibility. One side can threaten escalation. The other side can decide that time is on its side. And when neither side believes the other is prepared to compromise, a temporary confrontation can become a much longer conflict. But Iran isn't the only regional actor creating pressure. The next argument shows how vulnerable America's regional partners could become.
I mean, you're absolutely right. They should. This is a no-brainer. But so far, they seem content to try to continue to poke and prod at the Houthis, and the Houthis aren't waiting. They're fighting back and firing missiles into both the Saudi-controlled territory of Yemen as well as into Saudi Arabia. And I've described it as Saudi Arabia is like a guy that lives in a glass house, and he's decided to get into a rock fight with the Houthis who live in a brick house. Well, he can throw rocks all day long at that brick house, and it's might break a window, that one window, and that's it. Whereas the Houthis can break up the Saudi house all day long simply because it's made of glass. It's vulnerable.
Johnson's glass house analogy captures his argument in one line. The side that looks stronger isn't necessarily the side that's less vulnerable. His assessment is that Saudi Arabia has infrastructure that can remain exposed to repeated attacks, while the Houthis can absorb a different kind of pressure. Whether viewers agree with that assessment or not, the strategic idea is important. Modern conflict isn't only about who has more weapons. It's also about infrastructure, logistics, and the ability to absorb disruption. And that same question of vulnerability becomes even more important when the interview turns toward Israel.
If Iran steps up and finishes knocking out the oil refineries in Ashdod and Haifa, then Israel's out of aviation fuel and out of diesel. And military trucks won't run, planes won't fly, helicopters certainly won't fly. So that's one way that this could be played. That would really inflict major damage on them. Now, Iran hasn't done that up to this point. So Israel continues to, thump its chest and pretend that it's this mighty power, but it's very, very, very vulnerable. And the vulnerability is increasing because it's not like the United States has got a surplus that we got your back. Don't worry, go ahead. No, Israel's not the place that they've got to start paying their own way.
Do you see the moment that Donald Trump says to Israel, go ahead and fight it by yourself, you are on your own? Is that going to happen?
This may be the most consequential strategic argument in the interview. Johnson isn't talking about individual battles. He's talking about the infrastructure required to keep a military campaign running. His argument is that damage to critical fuel infrastructure could create serious problems for aviation, military vehicles, and sustained operations. That's the guess analysis, not an independently established fact. But it raises a much larger question. How long can any military campaign continue if its critical infrastructure becomes increasingly vulnerable? And then there's another factor Washington cannot ignore: American political support.
Potentially, yes, it could. Once he decides that there's no more political advantage to be gleaned from them, and I think that's coming. There is a growing split within the MAGA movement, the Republican movement, that is anti-Israel, a growing percentage. It may actually now be a majority percentage. And, you're getting that in the Republican Party. And then the Democrat Party is equally split. So we got a situation where these mainstream parties are starting to come apart at the seams over over issues that previously there was agreement on.
And this could ultimately become the most important battlefield of all, American politics. Military support depends on political support. Johnson argues that divisions over Israel are growing inside both major U.S. political parties. If that continues, the question eventually stops being whether the United States can provide support. It becomes whether Washington still has the political willingness to do it. And that brings the entire interview back to Iran. Because if political pressure rises while Iran remains entrenched, the administration could face a problem that military force alone cannot solve.
Well, they'll gradually the strait will continue to open with countries paying the fee and submitting the paperwork. They do that, they get to go through. Then, if anyone's blockading it, like the United States, and the United States has real limits. They don't have a limited number of ships. Their Navy has shrunk dramatically over. The U.S. Navy has shrunk dramatically over the last 30 years. So it doesn't have the wherewithal to go out and push back and really enforce. So we'll see. I think Iran is positioned by virtue of its location, sharing the northern border with Russia and the western, eastern borders with Tajikistan and Pakistan, that it'll be able to see a CIA operation coming from a distance. So they've got these open relationships with the Tajiks, the Pakistanis, the Russians. Chinese are another major player behind the scenes, all doing their best to keep Iran afloat. And I think, candidly, Iran's going to continue to be a terrific thorn in the side of the Trump administration.
So here's the bigger picture. This interview isn't really about one attack, one statement, or one day of fighting. It's about whether this crisis is actually becoming easier to control. The Strait remains a major pressure point. Iran's position is presented as increasingly hardened. Regional conflicts create additional vulnerabilities. Israel faces questions about military sustainability. And inside the United States, political support for the broader strategy is becoming increasingly contested. The individual claims made by the guests are their analysis and should be independently verified. But the central warning is clear. A crisis doesn't become resolved simply because a politician says it is resolved. If the military, economic, regional, and political realities continue moving in different directions, Iran could remain a major strategic problem for Washington long after the headlines move on. And that's the real question now. Not whether the crisis is supposedly over, but whether it is becoming even harder to control.